About 6 months ago, I walked into the harbor master's office in A Coruña, near the northwestern tip of Spain. I was sweaty, I was crusted in salt, and let's be honest, I was completely out of it. I hadn't slept in 2 days. And the scene was a little surreal. There was a pop song playing in the background, and there was me just tiptoeing from side to side. All I really wanted, all I really needed at that point was a phone. But at that point, I was still very much struggling to get my tongue back to work. So, 2 days earlier, I was on the other side of Biscay, in France, ready to start in the Mini Transat, a single-handed transatlantic race across, well, the Atlantic Ocean. There were about 70 of us starting. It was a race. The boats were only 6.5 meters long. They're very, very small. And let's get this out of the way at the start. Solo sailing is basically romanticized masochism. So, the boats are tiny, tiny coffins, carbon fiber coffins. You sleep for 4.5 hours a day in 20-minute segments at most. You're either freezing cold or boiling hot, a little bit like in here, actually. And because you often don't know where you are, because you're not allowed to communicate during the race, well, you don't know where your competitors are, so you push yourself and the boat to the absolute limit. And the boats are pimped out carbon fiber racing machines, so they'll let you. They'll let you break it and yourself. And with a wall of sail above you, that's a normal boat in the background, and then there's us. We're about half the size. They're absolutely amazing to sail. You're having the time of your life, most of the time, unless you're sitting on deck crying. Now, the Mini is a really mixed bag. You have some professionals with 2 or more people working constantly on preparing them, on getting the boat, as fast as possible. But that's the minority. You have 2, 3, that's it. And then you have the adventurers who are, fulfilling a lifelong dream of theirs to sail across the Atlantic in a tiny boat. And then the third category, to which I counted myself, were the young guns. The ones trying to prove to the world that they can do this. And if you do well in this race, well, you might go on and sail bigger, better, faster. It's a bit like go-kart for Formula 1. And about 24 hours into the race, well, my generator broke. So there I was, and that gets us back to the beginning of the story, to A Coruña. There is a illustration done by François Denis. He's the race illustrator. He did 1 picture every single day. And not entirely sure, but I think that's me hanging onto the tip of Spain, dipping my feet into the big old Atlantic. Now, I did end up leaving again, but 300 miles, 12 hours later, with the local help, helped me buy a generator, but it didn't matter. The rest of the fleet were busy doing this, while I was practicing my Spanish. The race was over, undeniably over. And, well, I kept going, but I kept thinking, there's a second leg. If I had wanted to sail a race before, I definitely wanted to sail one now. And, so 4 weeks later, with a repaired fuel cell, we started into this very second leg, and the conditions were not unlike that. Water flying everywhere, with the boats hurling down the African coast. And, people moved all their weight back as far as possible to try to keep the bow up to prevent it burying and stopping the boat. And from the very beginning, there was chatter on the radio. Race committee, I have broken my bowsprit. Race committee, I have torn my spinnaker. I have torn my other spinnaker. I have broken my autopilot. I am abandoning, sailing to Fuerteventura. And I was sort of there like, well, this is actually quite nice. This is awesome. I had no problems whatsoever. I was absolutely hurling, battling it out with 2 or 3 more boats. Until about 12 hours later, when the wind went down and, the waves were still there, and everybody who's ever been in a car that suddenly braked Well, I know what that feels like. You fly forward. So I flew forward, the bow into a wave, the boat stops, grabbing onto something, and just like the car behind you, that wave didn't really care for the sudden obstacle. So it lurched up, went through the cockpit, almost waved as it went past. Slow motion, telling you. And down the hatch. So immediately, all the lights went out. My top light, my navigation light, the GPS, everything. Complete darkness. All that was left was the faint glow from my wristwatch. And those 2 seconds, they lasted like an eternity. But then, 2 seconds later, everything came back up again, rebooting itself, beep, 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 beep. System came online. So I jumped down below, and I had 300 liters of water inside the boat. And I checked everything, and it looked all right. I still had my navigation. Hey, I had finished the first leg. I was now sailing the second. I had everything. It was all working, except for one thing. The one thing that is not watertight on these boats, and because it's so heavy, it's on the floor. Guess what? The fuel cell. Killed it again. So I knew, while I still had all these things, navigation, GPS, all of it, within the next 24 to 36 hours, I would lose them all. And I started counting AA batteries for my backup GPS and taking the fuel cell apart, holding the parts up into the air, waving them, dipping them with toilet paper, trying to revive it. No luck. Eventually, you crash. And I crashed pretty hard. I wrapped my spinnaker, my biggest sail, all the way around the keel in the middle of the night, of course, and spent 2 hours trying to wrestle it back onto the boat. And, after that, I fell into the cockpit, exhausted, slept for 20 minutes. That was pretty good. Drifting somewhere off Africa, hove to. But you start thinking at this point, do I give up? It's pretty shitty at the moment. Do I go back? Do I keep going? Do I even possibly keep racing? And you reach a different conclusion every single time. But no matter what, you realize that, I'm still in the middle of the ocean, not going anywhere, at least not any faster than if I keep going. So I zigzagged my way to the Cape Verdes, lashing the tiller when I could, sleeping for 10 minutes. Most of the time it was more like 3. And after 5 days, I was 70 miles away from the island, and I lost my backup GPS. Of course, things tend to get worse before they get better. But then the voices, they start coming back, like you're hallucinating pretty badly at this point. What if you're not where you think you are? And, what if you miss that island? The next bit of land is Antarctica. So will you turn left and go towards Africa and then swim ashore and ask someone, where's the car? Yeah, trust me, if that had happened, I wouldn't be standing here. It's not a story I'd be willing to tell. So the truth is, I'm not the only one who had problems. I don't have a monopoly on setbacks, One guy broke his mast during leg 1, and he, into 3 pieces. He had the short stump, somehow made it to Portugal, glued it all back together, and restarted, finished the leg. A lot of people, they lost rudders. Almost all of us tore sails, a lot of them. But the best story is a couple of years ago, where one guy was threatening to lose his keel, the big lead weight that keeps you upright. So he took down his sails, jumped overboard, tied a big knot around it, and heaved it back into the boat, and finished the leg. So what happened to me? Things were bad, but they weren't that bad. I did manage to go to the Cape Verdes eventually, despite the inner nagging of my inner devil, and I restarted with the help of some other mini sailors, heading west towards the finish as one of the last boats. And my goal had been simple, I wanted to sail a race. I wanted to sail above my means, whether that is my boat, my budget, my experience, my age, you name it. And I was absolutely exhilarated to leave. And at the same time, after 5 years of preparing for this one race, well, you can imagine it, the race had turned into an adventure, and finishing just for the sake of finishing, well, that felt a little weird. So, at the same time, if I would have stayed, gotten on a plane, said, fuck it over, I'm leaving, I'm going home, I would have regretted it. So that last leg from the Cape Verdes to the Caribbean, 10 days, and after about 5 of them, I started, rediscovering some of the things I had originally signed up for. Surfing down big Atlantic waves, the acceleration when you do so, dodging thunderstorms during the night, an awful lot of them, and thin fluorescent lines left by your rudders, leaving behind. I told you at the beginning, romanticized masochism. And yes, a bit of the race, it came back as well. So that feeling that you have that always brings you back, it was overshadowed a lot of the time. It always comes back. And that's got absolutely nothing to do with sailing. It just happens that that is my own special niche. So it turns out that if you are in a race, it's best not to stop. But if you do, if you absolutely have to, if you have to stop, if you have to pause, well then you better make sure you get going again. Thank you.